Good evening. I'd like to call the March 5, 2018 meeting of the University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Rapp?
Here.
Mr. Wiseman?
Here.
Mr. Sims?
Here.
Mrs. Pardee?
Here.
Mr. Erdl?
Here.
Mrs. Cameron?
She's there.
She's here. Mrs. Weiss?
Here.
All those who are able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item of business is the approval of the minutes. We do have minutes distributed from the February 20, 2018 meeting. Has everyone on council had an opportunity to review the minutes? Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes by Mrs. Pardee, a second by Mrs. Weiss. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, would you call the roll?
Mr. Rapp?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
This is now the portion of the meeting where we take comments from the audience. Is there anyone in the audience who would care to speak? If so, if you would please come to the microphone at the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you may proceed.
Sure. My name is Paul Miller. I live at 2370 Charney Road. I've lived there for 40 years. I'm not in favor of the proposed ordinance allowing chickens in our city. I visited a house where they had chickens and looked at the chicken coop. My reasons for opposing the ordinance are primarily information gleaned from the CDC plan. According to the CDC, there were 1 million cases last year, 19,000 involved hospitalization, and 380 deaths from salmonella. It's only one of the many diseases that you can get from chickens. Disease lives in the chickens, in their intestines, and sheds in droppings. Ordinance today suggests that we have 6. Most people don't realize every 15 to 20 minutes a chicken defecates. Take that 15 to 20 minutes and 6 and do the numbers, 24 hours. You're going to have a total of 450 to 500 per day defecations. The symptoms of salmonella are the following. You could possibly get diarrhea, fever, vomiting, abdominal cramps. Highly susceptible are, as usual, infants, elderly, and those with a weakened immune system. When you have the chickens, the areas that are contaminated are the soil, the coop, the hay, and the peanuts. The other diseases that chickens transmit are conjunctivitis, severe respiratory distress, pneumonia, organ failure, West Nile virus, UTI, and death. Now, I took a look at Poultry Science, is a publication distributed nationally. Looked at volume 93, issue 11. This was in 2014. He asked 56 questions of 1,486 surveys. That's what they got. The respondents were people who owned chickens. Not the major players in the world like Purdue people. I'm talking about individuals who own chickens. This is their responses. Allowed guests in the pens. 70% of them said, yes, I was allowed when I visited the chicken coop in Cleveland Heights. Wear different clothing. 40% do not. We're the same. Wear different clothing when cleaning. 50% do not. The clothing is contaminated when you clean the coop. To disinfect, this is right from the CDC. This is how it recommends. Disinfecting, you have to wash your hands, a cutting board, the dishes, utensils with soap and water after contact with raw eggs. Thoroughly cooking eggs with both the yolk and the white, both are firm. Now let me give you some facts. These are just plain facts, salient facts about chickens. 5% are roosters, but you do not know that. You can't tell at birth. Now, a rooster will give out a decibel level of 90. Now, what is a decibel level of 90? That's a dog barking. Okay? 95% of them of the chickens will give out a decibel level of 70. That's a couple of people of talking. Except that when they're laying eggs, that decibel level rises. Now, when a person has a chicken, these hens, who are going to lay eggs, the hens do not lay eggs continually. They start at 5 months, and they primarily end at 2 years. Okay, so what happens at the end of 2 years? They don't lay eggs. Just to give you an idea, the city of Minneapolis has had this on the ordinance, and they said it's okay. 2002, they got 6 calls out of the number of people who have them, said, what am I going to do with these chickens? They're old. I don't want them. They're not laying eggs anymore. What can I do with them? 10 years later, 2012, 500 calls. Now, there's a number of predators also involved. You're talking about cats, dogs, deer, possum, and coyotes. They also give out an odor. The noise and the nuisance. Let's talk about other communities. Beechwood has one, but in essence what Beechwood is doing is saying, you know what, I'm going to put it on the books that you can have it, but I'm going to eliminate about 97% of all the homes in Beechwood. Why? Because it's 1.1 acre minimum in Beechwood. And it's 200 feet from the house, the coop. Proposed amendment is 20 feet. You don't have any idea what 20 feet is? Okay? This is how far 20 feet is. $20. That's it. So what anyone who has a house here, a coop could be in the next yard, 20 feet from your house. Now, currently on the books, on Ordinance 618.20, which you have amended, which prior to that said chickens were allowed in the city except 500 feet. Now you don't want that. You only want 20 feet. To me, that's truly unacceptable. You have a choice. you can approve the ordinance that only a handful of people want. Or you can vote against the ordinance. That potentially puts a number of our residents at health risk. It's your choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Good evening. My name is Mark Harris. I live at 3412 Superior Park Drive, Cleveland Heights. Apologize for that. I am the president of the new Kiwanis Club that was established in late November. Finally have an opportunity to just brief you all a little bit. When I came to meet the mayor, he pointed out this plaque, the Old Cedar Center Club sponsors the University Heights Citizen of the Year. And we're honored to take that over. So you'll have a whole bunch of Cleveland Heights people and a few University Heights people so far. Deciding that for you, I'm just kidding. Anyway, for those of you unaware, Kiwanis is a service organization dedicated toward children and adults with disabilities. We are in the process of instituting service leadership programs in the high school and the 2 middle schools. That will take place by the end of the school year. All of the elementary schools will be implemented by the end of the calendar year. So in essence, we will have service clubs in 9 schools by the end of the year. The following year, we will be working with the private institutions as well as the colleges in the area to put in appropriate clubs for their curriculum. Satisfies a lot of requirements in regards to Cleveland Heights, University Heights, because they all have community service components. So for instance, on April 22nd, which is Earth Day on the Sunday, we are implementing a program where we are going to have volunteers go around each of the 2 cities and clean up. There will be a bag sponsorship program where people will sponsor a bag, whether it be recycling or trash. A student will take that bag and on Earth Day, go to a designated area, primarily the parks, because it's the safest place to do that, and clean up until the park is cleaned up. This includes Community Park here, as well as the parks in Cleveland Heights. After they're done, we'll all get together and have a barbecue. So these are the types of small projects that we'll be doing. And I made this offer to the school district, I made this offer to Cleveland Heights, now able to make this offer to you. If you have a project where you either need volunteers or fundraising to be able to accomplish that task that fits our community service component, we ask that you place the call to us.
Give me that phone number.
Area code 440-941-7299.
Thank you.
What's your name again?
Mark Harris.
All right, Mr. Harris, you expecting some calls.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I say expect some calls.
Okay, well, that'd be great. We would all appreciate it. We'd all appreciate if you would consider maybe joining our organization. If you're interested, you have our telephone number. More than happy to sit down with you, one-on-one, if you'd like, and go over the program, explain what membership means to us. It means as little or as much as you want to give. It's a volunteer organization. There's no requirements. You can do basically whatever you want. If you want to get involved in the inner workings of the club, great. If you want to get on a call list to be a volunteer, great too. And that goes for everybody here too, because I want to make sure that University Heights is as brought into this process as Cleveland Heights. I realize that there is a significant disparity in terms of population, but I don't see that. I see it as a school district. You are a part. I will treat you as fairly as I treat them, or as unfairly as I treat them. Anyway, I appreciate your time. You have my telephone number. You know who we are. We'll be very ever present. O'Reilly's Pub, March 23rd is our social meeting. If you'd like to attend, you're more than welcome to. Our second meeting of the month is always a social meeting. We go around Cleveland Heights and University Heights every month, go to a particular bar, have our little meeting, and then have a social hour. So thank you very much. Have a good rest of your meeting.
Could you repeat your phone number again?
I'm sorry?
Could you repeat your phone number?
Area code 440-941-7299.
Thanks,
Yes.
Mark. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
And Mr. Harris, the meeting at O'Reilly's, what was the date and time of that again?
That's March 23rd. The actual meeting time is at 6:30,
6:30.
and hopefully we're done by 7:15.
Oh.
There are a couple issues we have to discuss. We are open and transparent. Anyone's allowed to attend our meetings. There's no hidden agenda. There's no subterfuge. There's just a bunch of people that want to do a lot of good. And, you know, some of it gets a little messy, I'll be honest. You know, we have some issues we have to work through. You know, the club's been gone for a decade and a half. And so we have some repair in the neighborhood we have to do. And some name recognition and things of that nature. Again, thank you. I don't want to hold you any more than I have to. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Okay, are there any other comments from the audience?
Hi again. I made handouts. So,
Could you please state your name for the record?
yes.
Thank you.
My name's Laura Francis. This is my husband Kyle. We live on Meadowbrook, and we are the chicken enthusiasts. So we came today to talk about some of the public health concerns that have been noted to us. So everyone has paper, and you guys can look at my poster. Sorry if it falls apart. So according to the University of Florida and the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, although chickens do carry many diseases that can be transmitted to people, it's very rare that people actually contract them. And salmonella is actually the only pathogen identified and reported in human disease outbreaks associated with live, non-commercial poultry. So that means backyard chickens, essentially. And that's reported by public health statistics. So there are many factors in how diseases are spread. And the epidemiological triad involves the environment, the agent, and the host. So those are the factors that make up how a disease is spread to people. So the environment are the external factors that are allowing for disease transmission. So in terms of backyard chickens, things like sanitation practices, how people clean their coops, how often they're required to do it. You don't just let things sit around forever. The space that the chickens have. It's not like this is a commercial farming operation where it's a big barn filled wall to wall with chickens. You don't have room to breathe and move around. It's talking about a couple of birds. So flock size, that plays into that also in terms of space. Also ventilation, we have enough room to breathe. That bacteria isn't sitting in an area that doesn't have oxygen to it. How do people deal with the waste that the birds create? I know you talked about how they do create waste. How is that maintained? How do people deal with that? That doesn't just sit in the coop forever, so what are we doing with it? And then also in that, something you didn't mention is deceased animal management. How are people supposed to deal with a bird that may pass away? Because that can be another factor in disease transmission. So there's the agent. The one I specifically focused on was salmonella, since it was really the only one that came into play with human diseases. So salmonella, like you said, it's found in the intestinal tract of chickens and many other animals. So actually the most common vector for this disease is actually lizards and turtles. That's why turtles were banned, because they carry salmonella and it's easily spread from turtles. But anyway, it's found in chickens, and I found this reassuring that most salmonella strains, so there's different strains of bacteria, like there's different breeds of dogs. The DNA is a little bit different, and only a few of those strains are actually pathogenic, meaning can cause disease in humans. And then I found a survey from the United States Animal Health Association that surveyed backyard chickens that people had, and they looked at the different diseases that these animals were carrying. And only 4% of those chickens actually carried salmonella, so it was a very low amount. So the third factor in that triad is the host, so the animal harboring the disease. So the chickens, they could have the disease, they might not. It's in their GI tracts and it's shed with feces. And humans may come into contact, like you said, by cleaning the coop, by collecting the eggs, and just by interacting with the birds, because it can be on their feathers or any other part of the bird. But like you also said, and I think the statistics you were looking at is they can also come from the eggs you buy at the store. They can come from the meat products you buy at the store because of the practices in the United States and how we butcher animals and how they're processed. That feces is involved in that. That's unfortunate, but that's why you have to cook your meat. The salmonella is not in the meat naturally. That's because of the way we butcher animals here. So that's kind of how the people with the host, and like you said, the most vulnerable populations are the very young, so people under 5 years old are most commonly affected, or people over 65. And then, like you said, people with compromised immune systems. So the way that it's actually transmitted is called fecal-oral. That's the root. So somebody has to be contaminated, whether on their hands from touching something, or on their clothing, like you said, from cleaning the coops. And then they either have to put their hands in their mouth without washing them, they touched food and they ate it. So that's how it's transmitted. It's not just by touching it, you magically got it. Or walking in a yard where there was a chicken, you didn't magically catch it. You have to touch something contaminated with feces. So a way that you can mitigate this is simple hand washing, or don't wear your shoes in the house after you were outside in a chicken coop. Change your clothes after you cleaned it. They're pretty simple. And most of the research I did, when there were cases of people who got salmonella from their backyard chickens, it was they were cuddling chickens to their face. We don't kiss chickens. Or they didn't wash their hands thoroughly, or simply they didn't know. A lot of this is an education piece. So I know that Lakewood, as part of their ordinance, they require their citizens, when they apply for the application, to take a class. And the Cleveland Metro Parks offers a class on chicken keeping, and that's part of their requirements. So if that was a concern, that's something that we could do. Let's see, missing anything? Oh yeah, to put it all into context, my very nice husband printed the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, common diseases associated with chickens. There were 4. So the diseases that people could get from chickens, there were 4. Dogs, there were 21, 23, 21, in the 20s. And then there were cats, there were like 15. So in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of a bit more dangerous maybe to have a dog. A dog can give you quite a bit of disease. They could bite you. Not that I don't love dogs, I have a dog, I love dogs. But just putting it into context, yes, there's dangers. There are dangers with everything, but we can do things to mitigate those risks.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Francis, or Ms. Francis. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city at this time? Okay, well then the next item on the agenda is reports and communications from the mayor and the taking of action. I do have a few things to go over. Tomorrow, we will be having a joint Finance Committee meeting at 6:30 p.m. here at City Hall. I will be presenting as mayor my budgetary priorities for the remainder of the year and beyond. In preview of tomorrow's meeting, I will be expressing my desire tomorrow to better serve our community with strategic additions to our city administration, namely the additional employees in the areas of economic development, civic engagement, and communications. In the 2 months that I've been mayor, I continue to observe from the inside that which I perceived as a resident. Our city is underserved. While we have some talented, dedicated people working in City Hall, It remains, in many respects, a skeleton crew, a holdover of forced austerity, where generating paper surpluses took priority over developing and delivering services. I maintain that you do not do more with less, you do less with less. Here in University Heights, we are done doing less, and there is much to do. These additions will help get those things done. Beyond the March 6 finance meeting, we have reserved March 12 for an additional finance meeting, if we deem it necessary, and we are looking to introduce the budget at the next City Council meeting on March 19th, and then hold a special meeting on Monday, March 26th at 7 p.m. to take a vote on the budget. Planning Commission. We have moved the Planning Commission meeting to March 13 at 7:30 p.m. here at City Hall. We may also be moving the BZA meeting as well, but we have not finalized a date and time as of yet. The server. Installation will begin this week on the new server here at City Hall. The electrician will be here tomorrow to begin work on the cable. This is another step towards improving our own infrastructure so that we can better deliver services to our residents. The rebrand. I am pleased to announce that we have entered into an agreement with Guide Studio for the rebrand of our city. As we get ready to embark on Phase 1, we will be composing a steering committee of approximately 7 to 9 people who will be responsible for advising the process, making decisions, and advocating for the determined solution. This is not to be confused with the cultivated set of community stakeholders with whom we will have 1 or 2 workshops to verify the brand story and fill in details that quantitative research cannot provide. The Trash Tribune. Our email edition of At Your Service deployed over the weekend, and the hard copy is being delivered by service employees this week. I have asked for volunteers for the Communications and Development Commission, and we're going to meet on March 13th at 7 p.m. here at City Hall to discuss plans to improve or otherwise move on from the Trash Tribune. A few of you have urged me to abandon it now. However, it remains a conduit for delivering important information to our residents. And if we're going to discontinue it in whole or in part, we should do so thoughtfully and with an alternative in place. The semi-annual household hazardous waste pickup is this Friday from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. and Saturday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Hazardous waste includes oil-based paint, varnish, automotive fluids, oil, gasoline, kerosene, pesticides, adhesives, driveway sealer, roofing tar, and rechargeable batteries. It does not include latex paint. Latex paint may be dried. You may use kitty litter, or sometimes it just dries on its own in the can, and dispose of it, put it out with your regular trash. We're also doing confidential paper and document shredding at those same times. We will have locked containers for the deposit of your confidential paper and documents you wish to have shredded. It will also be March 9th and Saturday, March 10th. You should remove all metal clips, plastic bags, and other materials which would contaminate the paper or damage the equipment. Regular staples left in the paper are okay. The Solar Neighbors United Cuyahoga County Solar Co-op meeting will be held here in council chambers on Wednesday, March 14th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. For information about going solar, there will be expert advice provided. And if it is something that you're interested in doing and you are interested in learning how you can save money by switching over to solar power, they will have information on that there. There are summer employment opportunities, and we are taking applications for summer employment at Purvis Park. The newsletter has a link for the online application. Commissions. Our search is continuing for candidates for the Fair Housing Commission and Planning Commission. Please forward your statements of interest and resumes or CVs to me. The Parade Committee. The Parade Committee met last week. We had some enthusiastic volunteers turn out, and our next meeting of the Parade Committee will be March 20th at 6:30 p.m. here at City Hall. The Council and Mayor Retreat. Last week, City Council and the Mayor held a special meeting for purposes of conducting a retreat. Vice Mayor Sue Pardee and I facilitated the retreat, and all council members participated. Going forward, we identified some collective priorities in housing, economic development, and branding, and Mrs. Pardee will cover this in greater detail in her report. Swenson's. At the last meeting, I inadvertently omitted to provide a Swenson's update, and I will provide it now. On President's Day, I hosted a meeting with CEO Jeff Flowers, Beechwood Mayor Martin Horwitz, and Beechwood City Councilman James Pash, who is a resident of Campus Drive and has been acting as the designated representative of the concerned Beechwood residents on the street. We discussed the issues, and we are exploring some possible resolutions. One that we are in the process of implementing now is limiting the hours of parking on the University Heights portion of Fenway Drive to make it a no parking zone during the early morning hours when most of the deliveries take place. We will also be taking down the no trucks sign, as that sign was apparently not a University Heights sign and was not installed by this city. We can speculate who might have put it up, but regardless, we did not. We will be removing that sign when we install the new parking signs. Beechwood has also agreed to look into whether it would be willing to propose, design, and pay for the installation of additional landscaping, which Swenson's would be open to, provided it does not block the view of Swenson's from Cedar Road. The Hyperloop. Last Monday, in my capacity as a board member of NOACA, I attended the Hyperloop announcement at the Great Lakes Science Center. Present were the CEO of Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, Inc., Dirk Alborn, together with several other senior officials and employees of HTT, together with NOACA Executive Director Grace Galucci, several members of the NOACA board, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, Congressman Tim Ryan, State Senator Matthew Dolan, County Executive Armin Budish, and numerous other officials, dignitaries, and stakeholders. Hyperloop is poised to be the next generation of transportation technology that would succeed high-speed rail. Projected to travel at just under the speed of sound, capsules would fly through a 4-meter-wide vacuum tube. The Cleveland-Chicago route was selected for a feasibility study because of the largely straight and flat terrain between our cities and the existing right-of-way along the turnpike. It is only fitting that Ohio serve as a site for this new technology, Ohio long being the established leader in flight technology. Only now, instead of flying through the air or into outer space, we'll be flying through a vacuum tube in as few as 28 minutes to Chicago. The science is rooted in technology developed by Dr. Robert Goddard, the father of modern rocket propulsion, as modified by inventor Elon Musk, who is perhaps better known for Tesla and SpaceX. As a NOACA board member, I gave and continue to give this feasibility project my enthusiastic support. Guns. I have had several residents contact me about whether, after the Parkland school shooting, the city of University Heights would take action on guns, and I think I must address this. In 2006, effective 2007, the state legislature passed a bill preempting local government regulation of firearms. Governor Taft vetoed that bill, and the state legislature overrode that veto. The city of Cleveland challenged this statute, and in 2010, the Ohio Supreme Court upheld the preemption law. Under present law, Revised Code 9.68, we as a city may not pass any sort of ban on any firearms. We may not implement gun control. We may not ban firearms from our public parks. We may not require the registration of firearms. And if we do, we can expect a legal challenge. And per the City of Cleveland precedent and Revised Code 9.68B, we can expect not only to lose, but to pay the attorney fees and expenses of the party that challenges our ordinance. So the question has been put, what can we do? We can pass a resolution calling upon the Ohio General Assembly to take action and recommend what that action may be, whether it is a ban on certain firearms, such as the AR-15, or accessories such as the bump stock, which can make a semi-automatic weapon fire at a near automatic weapon rate, resulting in the carnage we saw last year in Las Vegas. We can urge the implementation of firearms restraining orders, as done in California, which has received a positive treatment in a recent opinion piece in the National Review. We can call for a repeal of Revised Code 9.68 and restore local control to local government on this issue. Governor Kasich himself has called for a ban of the AR-15. Former Attorney General Mark Dan has expressed in a recent op-ed his own devil's bargain with the gun lobby as a public official and his regret that he did not do more. The President himself has expressed numerous opinions on the subject, suggesting support for some limitations. It seems as if we may well be at a turning point in this country. And I say this as someone who is trained and been certified in basic firearms by an NRA certified instructor, and who otherwise generally supports the right to bear arms. In my view, no constitutional right is unlimited. The First Amendment has time, place, manner restrictions, for instance. One may not yell fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire. And the Supreme Court has declined to extend First Amendment protection to obscenity. As for the Second Amendment, I respectfully submit that an AR-15 modified with a bump stock is similarly obscene and not worthy of constitutional protection. Anyone in the community and on council who is interested in working on such a resolution within the bounds of what we may legally do under state law, should feel free to contact me. Finally, on a sad note, I must note the passing of a pillar of our community, Jill Barr of Edgerton Road. Many of us up here knew her. I did not know Jill Barr nearly as well as I wish I had. I met her over the summer while I was campaigning for this office. I learned she and her family were very close to the Sears family, and Mike Sears, being a college friend of mine who lives over on Dysart, gave us instant credibility with each other. She was friendly and outgoing, and I liked her right away. We hung out at her Streets block party last August, and she introduced me to all of her neighbors. She loved her children, she loved the Sears' children, and she was a passionate advocate for our public schools and for our public school families. The last time we were in touch was less than 2 weeks before she went into the hospital. She wanted to thank me for some comments I had made in support of our public high school, Heights High. And to me, it was nothing. Of course I support our public high school, and for that matter, all of our schools for all of our children here in University Heights. And she was quick to agree that families whose children go to any of our schools, public or private, should never feel unseen or unwanted. I was really looking forward to working more with her here in our community. I already counted her as a friend since she was a friend of Chris and Mike's, but I was looking forward to knowing her as well as a friend ought to know another friend. But most of all, having this hole I feel inside, knowing her only as I did for the short time I did, I feel for those who knew her well and loved her as she them. Her family, her friends, and all of those she touched in her short but well-lived 47 years on this earth. So Jill, may you continue to inspire and live in our hearts. And that is the conclusion of my report. Thank you. Take a motion to amend the agenda to consider resolution number 2018-16, which will be a resolution honoring Police Chief Stephen Hammett.
So moved.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Thomas, will you take the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sampson?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron? Aye. Mrs. Watts?
Aye.
Okay. Then we will consider then Resolution 2018-16, a resolution honoring Police Chief Stephen Hammett, which will state as follows. Whereas University Heights Police Chief Stephen Hammett began his law enforcement career with the Cleveland Heights Police Department in 1987, joining the Shaker Heights Police Department in 1990, where he remained until 2011. And while with Shaker Heights, Chief Hammett climbed through the ranks from patrolman, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and deputy chief, spending time in the Uniform Division, Detective Bureau, Crime Prevention Unit, and the Internal Affairs Unit. And whereas in 2011, Chief Hammett was appointed Police Chief of University Heights, And whereas Chief Hammett improved our city police department through a number of initiatives, namely, he implemented general orders, helped regionalize the communications center and jail operations, established the Detective Bureau House, involved our city in the partnership with South Euclid, Shaker Heights, Cleveland Heights, and Beechwood in the establishment of the East Side Department's group enforcement known as EDGE, the regional SWAT. And with those same partner cities, the Accident Investigation Unit, upgraded our patrol fleet, and managed public safety aspects in the CHUH school relocations on and about the site of Wiley Middle School. And whereas on this, the occasion of the final city council meeting before Chief Hammett's retirement, the city and its leadership wish to recognize his contributions to safety and progress in University Heights, which are an inspiration for all of us in city government. Now, therefore, be it jointly proclaimed by the mayor and resolved by the City Council of the City of University Heights, Ohio, that, Section 1, we recognize and thank University Heights Police Chief Stephen Hammett for his exemplary service and accomplishments over the course of his law enforcement career, and especially for his service and accomplishments as Chief of the University Heights Police Department. Section 2, we declare March 16, 2018, Chief Hammett's final day on the job at University Heights to be Chief Steve Hammett Day in the city of University Heights. Section 3, it is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the passage of this resolution were adopted in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and any of its committees that resulted in such formal action were in meetings open to the public in compliance of all legal requirements. Section 4, this resolution shall take effect at the earliest time allowed by law. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Pardee, second by Mrs. Cameron. Is there any discussion?
Yes, actually, I would just like to thank the chief for his years with us. I think it was a huge scoop that we got to scoop you up from Shaker. It was our great good luck. In my experience with you, you have been the consummate professional, providing professional development and training to your people, guiding us through all these regional projects, but you've done it all with so much heart, so much warmth, and that is something to be cherished, and I really appreciate your time. You will be missed, but I look forward to you having a great time. Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes,
If I
Mrs.
may.
Cameron. Yes, you may.
Chief Hammett, I wish to thank you sincerely for the assistance you provided me in dealing with my recalcitrant teenager from ages because of you, and you so impressed my son. He, after speaking with you, he accepted a job the very next day. And he has continued with that career. He, because of the conversation you had, he was able to pass all the established tests that were required for employment. He was able to pass, he was able to accept, he was able to develop a career, and he is now a graduate of Cleveland Heights High School. He graduated with an honor from some club, distributive education club, because of the ability for him to get a job during his high school time. He was able to graduate with the honor because he got straight A's in his attendance at work and based on his character that he developed while he was there and his behavior and everything. So I attribute that directly to the conversation and the time that you spent with him. And I wish to thank you sincerely. And just to point of reference, he will be entering Tri-C program at college this month, actually. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Cameron. Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think people realize how hard it is to be the police chief in a small town. You have to be part principal, part boss, part secretary, part bouncer, and part grandpa.
Right.
And then come to the council meeting and listen to the likes of us be annoyed about certain different things and look for answers at Chief. Your leadership in the city will be missed. We've appreciated so much the work you've done for us, and the fact that you've been responsive to every question we've had. In particular, your work with the high school when it moved here, and you know, we were hearing a lot about how the world was going to end once the high school came here, and I cannot remember any problems at all, and I think that's directly due to the leadership that you had in the department and the way you carry yourself on a daily basis. It's very admirable, and thank you for serving. We're going to miss you, but I'm glad you're getting to be able to enjoy yourself. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Sims.
So, Chief, I would just add to what has already been said. And I think Councilman Wiseman really summed it up when he said leadership and responsiveness. I think that you've done a great job for our city. You know that I personally am hoping that there's a way that you can continue some level of engagement with University Heights, because we don't want to lose the momentum that we have and the years of experience and just the institutional knowledge that exists around everything that you have done to improve us as a community. So I personally want to say thank you to you, and you absolutely will be missed by the city, the administration, as council, and I'm sure by the residents, most importantly.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Are there any further comments? Well, I'm going to say this. I think I've said it before, but Chief, I regret that we only got to work about 2.5 months together. But I don't begrudge you at all the retirement that you have earned and deserve, and I know that you won't be a stranger and that we will be seeing you here in our city. So I look forward to every opportunity we have to work together in the future, even beyond March 16th. So thank you, Chief. Oh yeah, we vote on this. If there's no further comment, then Ms. Thomas, if you would take the roll, please.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron? Aye. Mrs. Watson?
Aye.
Okay, just as a matter of housekeeping, we have two,
I think the chief might want.
oh, I'm sorry. Please, please.
Obviously, I didn't expect all this. I don't have a prepared speech or anything, but I do want to say I will miss my interactions with council. You all kept me sharp. You made me do my research, stay on the cutting edge of my profession, and I appreciate that. I think we share the same dedication for the city. We all give it our best. We all want to see the city grow and flourish and be as great as it can be. And I've enjoyed working with this council as well as the past council. That I think Mr. Simpson's party, you might be the only two remaining from that original council. But I enjoyed it. I'll miss my interactions with you, my co-workers, the other directors, as well as the citizens of University Heights. But Mayor, I'll be around. I still
All right.
Thank you. I'm counting on it. Thank you, Chief. As a matter of housekeeping, there are 2 copies of the resolution for everyone up here to sign, and one is obviously for the chief and one's for us to keep, so. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item A, ordinance 2018-14, amending codified ordinance section 1250.02 of the Planning and Zoning Code entitled Permitted Uses to permit chicken coops in a U1 district upon issuance of a special use permit. This is on second reading. Mr. Wiseman, would you care to proceed?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
We introduced this at the last council meeting, right? My understanding is that we're going to, first of all, I'd like to thank the administration and the law director in particular working with us on this. We got it ready at a building committee meeting. I know we got it to the administration with not a lot of time to spare, and I appreciate the work that the law director especially has done on this and preparing preparing it for the meeting and getting it ready to go. So my understanding is that we're not going to vote on it tonight because there's actually part of it that needs to be approved by Planning Commission, and then it'll get sent back to council. But nonetheless, I feel compelled to talk about some of the issues that have been raised. You know, as I sit here, I can't believe that we're having the discussion that we're having. I was wondering how many chicken farms and chickens were in Ohio while we were hearing the presentation. And I looked on the internet, and there are, Ohio has 30 million laying chickens, which are the ones that will be in Ms. Francis's backyard, hopefully, and 10 million pullet chickens. Those are the ones that you take home for dinner. So 40 million chickens are in the state of Ohio, roughly, about any time. And we've heard precious few stories about people dying or even getting sick about being with chickens. You would think that when you go to the Ohio State Fair and there are chickens for people to visit, that they would have hermetically sealed suits and all kinds of shower washes for you because chickens are so dangerous. I talked to the gentleman at the county health department who's in charge of backyard chickens. He said he's received 4 complaints in 12 years from all the citizens and all the cities that allow chickens in the county. I talked to South Euclid and the vet in South Euclid who helped them push their ordinance, and she said, yes, it's true chickens carry some kind of diseases, and unless you kiss the chickens or grab the eggs, a broken egg, and don't do anything and don't clean yourself, you might have some issue. But she said, as with any other pet or any other animal, all you have to do is wash your hands and change your clothes, and that's really how it goes. She has 3 toddlers. I said, do you have any problems letting your kids play with the chickens? She said, absolutely not. She's not really worried about it. Salmonella itself is not really an airborne disease, so unless you're going to touch the chicken waste and then go to your mouth and not take care of yourself, you're really not in any kind of a worry. We heard from Mr. Miller that there were 380 salmonella deaths in the country. I don't doubt that's true. I don't know how many of them are from backyard chickens, but I would guess none of them are from backyard chickens. And I think what this is a study in how we can make something that is simple and peaceful and non-threatening into something that's going to destroy the world because it's so incredibly dangerous. And I never thought I would see the day where people would talk about backyard chickens like it's some kind of horrible health problem. We talked at the last meeting about somebody opined that they wouldn't want a 2-year-old next to a chicken coop. Well, these chickens aren't going to be running wild, and unless if your 2-year-old goes into the chicken coop, my guess is that you'll clean his shoes off, clean his hands, and change his clothes because that's what you do. But most people have pets. Nobody worries about the pets. You take them to the vet, you get them fixed. So I'm a little concerned about the bluster that's being pushed around this issue. I thought Ms. Francis spoke very eloquently. This is, I'm guessing, maybe your 5th or 6th meeting where you've come and presented to council about backyard chickens. Again, this is only for the year. We want to see how it looks and how things go. But this is what happens when you try to make something new, right? You know, it becomes sort of a study in how can we throw a wrench into the system and how can we talk about it like it's really terrible. But again, with 40 million chickens in the state of Ohio and I defy anyone to bring us evidence of one of these children who deals with these chickens who have come down with any kind of a disease. I don't understand where the opposition is coming from, but you know, you have a vote, you can oppose anything, I suppose. But I think the evidence is clear. I think this council has put a lot of deliberative attention into deciding whether or not to have backyard chickens, and I think it's something that we should pass without reservation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Wiseman.
Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Sims.
All right. Councilman Wiseman is one of my closest allies and associates and colleagues on this council. I understand his frustration, especially in the fact that some of the concerns that have been raised have probably come up in the last few meetings. But I happen not to feel the same way about this issue in Councilman Wiseman does. And I don't think anybody is trying to express a concern that backyard chickens will destroy the world, or it's the most terriblest thing that has ever happened and potentially will happen in the city of University Heights. But I have reservations and I have concerns. And on top of that list is that I believe that what we're doing probably will only benefit a handful, as it was put, and it could present problems for hordes. Secondly, I am concerned not just about the possibility that the chickens themselves may transmit some diseases, but I do believe that if this is done and if it's not done correctly, then it's a great opportunity that it will attract vermin and, as was also mentioned tonight, predators. And we don't want that in this community, or at least I don't. I think some of the other communities that have been highlighted are a lot different from University Heights in terms of the ones that currently have this type of ordinances and opportunities within their city. I think our city is a much tighter city. I am concerned about the proximity to the homes where the coops and the runs and even where the waste might be kept with respect to other properties where the chickens are not housed. So for me, I don't see this as an enhancement. I don't see any compelling reason to do it. I don't even believe that it's in the character of our city, or certainly the character that I would want our city to be known for. And I could be behind the times, you know, maybe this is the new way of the world, but this is the perspective that I'm bringing to this council tonight. Lastly, I would say it was also brought up, and it was brought up by the resident who's interested in this, that yes, there is another community that allows or permits chickens in the backyard, but in response to some of the concerns that have been raised, a part of what anyone who has one is obligated to do is to go through a training so that they will know how to clean and how to handle the chickens in the backyard. And right now, our legislation does speak to sanitation, but it doesn't speak specifically to, you know, what has to be done, when it should be done, or how it should be done. And more importantly, it doesn't place any responsibility on the owners of the backyard chickens to know what they're doing with the chickens to minimize any possible threat to the community. So with those few words, I actually didn't even realize that we weren't voting on this tonight. But I think everybody at this table knew that I'm personally not in favor of it and have not been from the beginning. And I think that the resident, Laura, has made some very good presentations. And I think that she personally has a very responsible approach to this. But what I have to recognize is what we're about to do is institutionalize something, and every person will not come to the table in the same way that she will.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Mr. Ertl.
Yes, I would not deny the residents of University Heights a fresh egg. I like the idea of fresh eggs, but I just want to be sure that it's a safe process. And I'm a little concerned about the regulation of the chickens in the yards from the city's perspective. My understanding is the city checks in on people with chickens if there's a call, if there's a concern from a neighbor, that sort of thing. And I'd like to see, you know, annual inspections, and I'd also like to make sure that it's not just that the coops themselves are within regulation of you know, the footage and that sort of thing, and the heights and this and that, but also sanitary conditions. So you know, once that's put to rest, then I think I'll feel a lot better about the situation. But I just want to make sure that the residents of the city are safe.
Thank you, Mr. Ertl. Mr. Rock.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna figure out this microphone eventually. It's probably the angle there. I share some of your sentiment. I understand where you're coming from. When I first heard the request to have, all right.
Gave it like 3 minutes.
You did.
When I first heard this request and have this added to our consideration, I thought, wow, this is so forward thinking, this is so progressive. Northern Heights, this is great. This is something we should be thinking about. Like, we're gonna really lead the way. And then I saw like, we're the last city to do this in our surrounding cities. And I thought, well, I guess we're not as progressive as I thought, because all of our neighboring cities to some degree have some type of allowance for this, for chicken coops. So again, I was excited about the idea of like leading the way, but I'm actually more excited that we're gonna finally get into the 21st century and join what young families in the city want to do. And I know you would be responsible, and one comment that was brought up that somebody else might not be, and they're not gonna come to the table, and I get that, but they will come to the table, because they will be required to come to the Board of Zoning Appeals and get a special use permit. And we will have some face time with those residents and talk to them one-on-one, and we will be able to see their backyard before we approve the special use permit. And we will be able to give them instructions if we can have a fact sheet of some sort, because they will be at the table. We will be able to look at these coops every year on an annual basis. It's a special use permit and it expires in 1 year. So we have to renew. So there are opportunities to regulate this in the city as we see it here in these ordinances.
Thank you, Mr. Rock. Mrs. Weiss?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I also hear the concerns. What I liked about this ordinance, though, are 2 things, and then I want to add 1 thing. I like that this is an experiment. We're trying it for a year. We're going to see how, what calls we get, if we get any calls at all. The second piece is, like Councilman Rock said, is BZA, they have to go through BZA first. And that's kind of like a double check. What I would like to propose, though, is that we put in the ordinance that they go through that Metro Parks training. I think that's a great idea that we never heard about before, and I think that will just give some peace of mind to some residents.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Are there any further comments?
Mayor, if
Mr.
I may,
McConville.
Just to clarify process, I saw a look on your face, Mr. Rock, and want to make sure that council's clear on what the legal advice was with respect to the zoning ordinance. Under our code, in order for council to pass a zoning ordinance, that ordinance must first be considered by Planning Commission. So it was my recommendation to the mayor that both the zoning ordinance and the tandem regulations, even though they're not part of a zoning code, be sent to the Planning Commission for review so that Planning Commission could comment both on the zoning ordinance but also on the particular regulations. Any recommendation that Planning Commission makes is just that. It's a recommendation. It's not something that council would be bound by.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. McConville. Are there any questions for him based upon what he just said? All right. Are there any further comments at this time on the proposed ordinance? I think then if we could suggest a motion to table the ordinance until the next meeting, at which time it should be taken up on emergency.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Wiseman, second by Mrs. Cameron. Is there any discussion of this motion? Seeing none, Ms. Thomas, would you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron? Aye. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Okay. Next on the agenda is ordinance 2018-15, enacting codified ordinance section 618.25 entitled Keeping of Chickens to establish regulations for the keeping of chickens, and amending codified ordinance section 618.18 entitled Number of Animals Limited and 618.20 entitled Proximity of Dwellings for consistency with the regulations for keeping of chickens on second reading. Is there any discussion on this agenda item? Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move that we table this item C as well as a tandem ordinance to item B for the next meeting to be dealt with on emergency.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Wiseman, second by Mr. Sims. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Ms. Thomas, would you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron? Aye. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Tabled. Next is item C, motion for the approval of the purchase of pool chemicals from SAL Chemicals for the 2018 summer season. Mr. Picorni, if you could come to the podium and address this agenda item, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This is our annual purchase for pool chemicals, which we use during the summer in the swimming pool. We belong to a consortium of approximately 20 entities. 16 of them are cities and 4 of them are other entities such as county or athletic clubs. Every year we go out through the city of Mayfield Heights for these bids. This year's low bidder and our recommendation for the purchase of pool chemicals is Sal Chemical. We've used them several years in the past and we're quite happy with their delivery schedules and working with us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCorney. Are there any questions for Mr. McCorney?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
Okay. I don't know if I'm on. I'm on. I believe I had transmitted a couple of questions to you regarding just some insight into why the cost of these chemicals have increased, just overall so much, and why the large difference between the apparent best bid and the next bid?
Yes, you did, thank you. And I did research that a little bit today. Last year's low bidder was also Sal Chemical, so I was able to speak with a representative of Sal, asking them why there was such a significant increase. And we're looking at a cost on the sodium hypochlorite, which is actually the chlorine used in the pool, and that's what we use the most of, about 6,800 gallons of it every year. He had indicated that the material cost for the chlorine manufacturing it has gone up significantly, but more than that, the trucking cost has increased by 85%. There's been additional regulations on trucking chemicals. They've started logging trucks electronically for their travel over the roads and highways, and that has caused a shortage of trucking, which has increased the price by approximately 85% on the transportation and things. So that was why they were indicating that they had to bid higher.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Are there any further questions? Is there any discussion on the proposed motion? Well, that may have been premature. Is there a motion?
So moved that we would approve the purchase of pool chemicals from Sal Chemicals for the 2018 summer season.
Second.
Very good. We have a motion by Mr. Sims, a second by Mrs. Cameron. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Ms. Thomas, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron? Aye. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Next item on the agenda is a motion to hold an executive session immediately following this regular meeting for the purpose of discussing personnel, legal, and real estate matters. The council may have noted a few minutes ago during the course of our meeting, Mr. Iosu did enter council chambers, and he is here to address us in executive session to give us an update on labor negotiations. So if we would have a motion to go into executive session at the conclusion of the regular business portion of this meeting for that purpose, we would entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mrs. Cameron. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wiseman. Is there any discussion of the motion? If there is none, Mrs. Thomas, would you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron? Aye. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Thank you. That will be at the conclusion of the regular portion of this meeting. We now move to directors' reports, finance. Mr. Sheehan.
The mayor pretty much already covered this, but we have purchased a server. It will be installed Thursday and Friday of this week, so that we can unify all our computers on the campus. So we're looking forward to that. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. Law, Mr. McConville.
Very briefly, Mayor, just want to report to council that I did take a look at the city's point of sale ordinance and am satisfied that it meets constitutional muster and does not require any updating as our vacant dwelling ordinance did. Our point of sale ordinances indicate that any owner or occupant of a residential dwelling has the right to refuse a point of sale inspection, and that the city's remedy upon such refusal is to seek an administrative warrant. So we're right on point with the recent City of Portsmouth case, and just wanted to let you know that's why you won't be seeing any amended point of sale legislation.
Thank you, Mr. McConville.
Oh, yes. I am the recipient of persistent emails from a resident who has asked about whether a business can be started in the city that would be, I think, best described as a sort of trike ice cream business, a three-wheeler with an ice cream cooler on the back. There are pictures, pursuant to which someone could ride around and sell ice cream treats. We have an ordinance on the books that prohibits that, and it also encompasses food trucks. Any sort of mobile sale of goods, including food, is captured by this ordinance. So the reason I'm passing that along is I think that council may want to put the issue of food trucks and this particular type of business to committee and see if we want to come up with a set of regulations, time, place. I think in particular with respect to the proposal the resident was making, there's a safety aspect too. Certainly we should have some licensure in place, but that business that he's describing, in my mind, is different from a food truck business because there's such close potential for personal interaction, and I think it's targeted at children. So just passing that along and suggesting that maybe it is appropriate for committee.
Thank you, Mr. McConville. Did anyone have a question for Mr. McConville? Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you, Mayor. We discussed this. It hasn't been very long. It's since 2013 we prohibited the ice cream trucks, because I was here for that. And there was a large discussion about the safety aspect and the problem with, having children run across the street or run after the ice cream truck. And in fact, the chief, I think, gave us some advice about that, and that we were, there wasn't a whole lot of wavering in terms of that. However, now that Swenson's and their food truck may be a fixture in the city, I'm kind of surprised to learn that we don't allow food trucks either. They've been in our parking lot, actually.
Well, I think
the ordinance doesn't really, it's not really specific to that, but if you read what it's capturing, I think it's probably the basis for prohibiting ice cream trucks. And you could see where someone might step in and argue you can't have any food trucks in the city. In just doing a little bit of research in connection with the email correspondence I got, there has been a trend lately of communities in Northeast Ohio that have banned ice cream trucks and businesses that are similar to the one that this resident was proposing. But as you say, Swenson's has a food truck. Certainly there are other food trucks around. And again, I'm just making you aware of the emails that I was receiving from a particular resident.
Yeah, I think I would also point out that, at least per my reading of the ordinance that Mr. McConville has identified, that when the Swenson's food truck has operated in a parking lot or, say, in a surface lot in John Carroll, that it wouldn't necessarily impinge on the ordinance. But were it parked on Silsby and selling hamburgers while on the city street, that could be a problem. query whether, when it's appeared at a block party, whether it then was a problem, the street was closed. But all the same, it was allowed at that point, or at least, nobody said anything then.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the law director for staying on top of it and figuring out exactly where this should all be.
You're welcome. Anything further on this point? Mrs. Cameron?
Well, Mayor, I would like to simply say, if the person is making a suggestion that they would like us to reconsider the ordinance in terms of being allowed to be at block parties or in a place where it may be stationary, for instance, if he wants to go and park at the park, Purvis Park or our new park, I would not be opposed to reconsidering that part of an ordinance for that purpose, be it a bicycle or anything else. But I think we had thoroughly vetted the whole issue of a moving vehicle moving through the city to sell anything. We had been through that quite extensively. So if there is some pleasure on council to reconsider the motion, consider a motion to that effect, that we review the situation in terms of the person being permitted to operate the bicycle at a park, I'm willing to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Cameron. Okay, if there's nothing further from the law director?
Nothing further.
Okay, we'll move to public safety. Chief Hammett.
No report.
I just wanted to report Sunday morning at about 3 a.m. there was a motor vehicle accident on the corner of Green Road and Cedar. Once again, for the fourth time in 6.5 years, a traffic box was destroyed.
Seriously?
We contacted, twice at Warrensville and Cedar, once on Green Road, once here, and also the one small traffic control box in front of Macy's. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like this. They knocked this one over. We called signal service, our emergency technicians out, and they were able to salvage the box, restore power within 3 hours, which was good because there was a lot of traffic up there Sunday morning. They're gonna send us an estimate because it's not permanently fixed. We'll get an estimate from them and we'll come before council. And I believe in the past we've submitted these to Norma, our
Correct.
carrier.
Yes.
And on 2 occasions, I believe they were able to get the violator to reimburse them for the repairs. This one, we know it was a he because there was a witness, ran into the box, got out of his car, looked at it, see how much damage he caused, and got back in his car and left. So we do have witness statements. There was debris left behind, not a license plate this time, but enough debris for us to determine exactly what kind of the make and model of the car. So we'll see if we can track him down. I'm pretty confident we will be able to find out who did it. So that's that. And I also wanted to report back on the 23rd. I was part of a panel discussion at Roxborough Middle School, along with Wayne Dawson and some other really accomplished people. I felt a little bit out of place because these people were really accomplished. And it was part of their Black History Month celebration. I just want to say, I was amazed at some of the questions that came from these K through 5th grade students. Not one of them asked me what kind of gun I had, or things that little kids normally ask. Where's your taser? These were actually well thought out questions. Granted, they were vetted some by the teachers, but it was really well done. And I think the schools here are underrated and underestimated, and I think they're producing quality students. I was just surprised that they were so mature and so prepared, and they sat still for it was nice. And last thing, once again, I want to say thank you to council. The mayor mentioned all the things the police department have been able to accomplish over the past 7 years. It's only because you all assist us. When we needed new cars, you let us replace our fleet of broken down cars. When we needed new equipment, you all let us replace our equipment. Whatever we needed to do, within reason, you allowed us to do it. There were tough questions that needed to be asked, and when we were able to answer, y'all gave us what we needed, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Perko.
Thanks, Mayor, Council. Just want to report for the month of February, Fire Department went on 141 emergency incidents, 93 of those being for EMS and 12 for fire. I believe currently at this time they're in Cleveland Heights for a residential home on fire. I also wanted to note of a commendation notice that we sent out to 3 of our members and 3 members in Shaker Heights, as well as 3 in South Euclid, for the assistance of a newborn baby delivery this past Saturday. Our squad was out, so our fire truck arrived as a first responder, started to render care to the newborn, and Shaker and South Euclid responded in to transport both mom and baby, which are both doing well.
Very good.
All right.
The fire department had a couple of leaks in the roof that have been rectified. That led us to look into an assessment of some of the areas where it was leaking in the past, with the kitchen being one of them. And it redirected our focus back to the original kitchen project from last year. We still have a leaking valve that was not replaced from the original project under recommendation, and it has now deteriorated the new cabinet, as well as separated the new countertop from the wall. So the people that were involved in the project from the fire department have contacted the various vendors that did work. We've had the floor re-repaired, the countertop re-glued and secured with some extra bracing, and we have some quotes coming in on the plumbing. But we're trying to get this project wrapped up and get it completed, because there's still some open electrical boxes and some unfinished work.
And the plumbing's the problem?
Yes.
One of the main problems, I guess, that we would have liked to have seen addressed first before we put.
Right, exactly.
And-
That was my question.
So now, young man,
He's gonna think he's in trouble, Councilwoman, if you address him that way.
he's not in trouble, but I've taken a little bit of time to talk to a couple of people, and I thought it was on the road to being repaired, but I see it has not. It is. You're telling me that now you all have re-repaired what we just purchased and spent $15,000 on, and it's being repaired because they still have not, we as a city have not addressed the leak.
Mostly correct, yeah. There were some recommendations made by the contractors and the firefighters about doing some of these repairs prior to the start of the remodel
Yeah,
to get the structural components fixed.
yeah.
And for whatever reason, some of those weren't completed. Now, the re-repairs they did under warranty, so there was no charge to us, but they did indicate to us that most likely some of these problems will reoccur.
Yeah,
So
because
we're
it's
trying to get
still
the
leaking.
plumbing. Yeah, the valve is still leaking.
Mayor,
Yes.
what can you do? Can you?
Get my wrench?
Can you help us out?
Well, the chief and I discussed this earlier. One of my concerns was when this, and you know, he wasn't the chief and I wasn't the mayor when this started, but one of my concerns was when this was done, it does not appear that we may not have used commercial grade products for what is in essence a commercial kitchen. And this countertop and this cabinet may be perfectly fine in my house, where the most work my counter gets is when I forget to put the pot under the coffee maker. But that said, Yes, he is going to be, the chief's going to be getting estimates for, fixing this valve. Water is the primary culprit here, it seems to me. I haven't gone over and looked under the sink at the damage myself, I candidly admit. But a leaking valve was a problem before. It hastened the demise of the previous kitchen, and if it wasn't properly repaired last year, then it will be the demise of this newer kitchen, and we can't have that. So that should be a priority to get resolved, and then if there's any further repairs necessary, then we'll have to address that then. I certainly will keep council in the loop, and if there is an expense that exceeds my spending authority as mayor, you will hear about it before the fact, not after.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to add that I've been over to see the remodel, and while I was there, I noticed that the plumbing was already leaking onto the new remodel. And when I asked about the situation, I was informed that it's been leaking for quite some time, and that this may be something that involves asbestos to fix.
Well, I believe last year the asbestos was remediated by a qualified remediator in the process of redoing the kitchen. I don't think asbestos will continue to be a problem in the project. I certainly hope not. I don't know, Chief, if you have any insight on that.
It kind of is still a problem.
Really?
In regard to the
Okay.
plumbing. The
Insulation?
floor, you're correct. The floor was abated, but when the plumbers were out during this project, I was one of the members that actually spoke with them. The problem with this is that the valve underneath the kitchen for the sink and the dishwasher is frozen. They actually informed us to not even touch it because it'll probably leak much worse. And so the next nearest shutoff is downstairs in the apparatus floor by the rescue squads, and that valve was frozen. So then they had a hard time locating where to shut it off down in the boiler room. And knowing the challenges we were up against at that time before we started on this project, I had asked the plumber what would be the cheapest way to fix it so that we can have a way to shut off the water so it doesn't ruin all the new cabinetry once it's in if the valve blows completely. And he had suggested probably the cheapest way would be to run a new copper pipe from the basement or from the where the ambulances are, put in a shutoff out there and run it up into the kitchen cabinet with another shutoff. And that would be a little bit costly because of the copper. And the reason for that is because the current piping is all wrapped in asbestos. So we could either, the cheaper route is to abandon that in place and install new.
Well, let's get some estimates and get it done before it ruins the kitchen again.
We have a couple estimates coming in.
Okay.
So,
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Sims?
yes. You reported about, I forgot the number now, I believe it was 12 fire runs.
Yeah.
And my only question is whether any of them were in the city or they were all in other communities.
There was about 60 fire incidents
60?
where the fire department responded as opposed to the emergency medical side of things.
Okay.
But 12 related more to house fires.
Right.
And I don't have the number breakdown, but they were not all in our city.
Okay, all right. I was just curious. And I also wanted to compliment you on your reporting. So far, you've helped me understand a lot about what's going on in the fire division that I was unaware of in the past. So those are good statistics. I hope you will continue to report the same, just for our information.
Sure. questions about the kitchen.
I just have to say, part of our job is to, this is the tough part of our job, is to keep administration accountable. And when you guys came last year about the kitchen.
I can't deal with this.
Oh, sorry. Again. This kitchen is gonna be nightmares, by the way, because I thought it was a water leak problem, a water leak project, and it escalated into other things, and we questioned the administration, and we tried to keep them accountable, and I kept stressing that you gotta do this the right way. We need a contractor, we need someone who can warranty this work, I just hope going forward we can do it the right way, because we're gonna have to hold people accountable for things like this, like we did in the past. So thank you for your continued patience and making sure this is getting it done the right way.
We appreciate it too. We're happy to get what we did get. We just want to make sure we can preserve it so it lasts long.
Okay.
Last week I got to meet with the John Carroll Police Department and their EMS force. John Carroll has always had a number of students that are involved in EMS. They're certified EMTs on the basic level. I think currently right now they have between 12 and 15, and they staff during the daytime hours. Basically, when there's a medical incident over there, our dispatch center will notify their police department, which they send an alert out to the students that are the volunteer EMTs. So they arrive on scene usually first and start to gather things like vital signs or bandage someone if they're bleeding, or perhaps start CPR. And we used to have a very good working relationship with them. They used to do ride-along time with us in the ambulance, and it kind of fell apart by the wayside through years. So I talked with their EMS chief and the police chief over there, and we talked about starting to bring back some of those programs. They've invited us to come to some of their continuing education for their EMT schools, and we're going to reciprocate that by inviting them to some of our paramedic training when it's applicable.
Excellent. I think that's great.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Perko. Was there anything further?
And last, I just want to say congratulations to Chief Hammond. You're welcome to retirement.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Next is Public Service, Mr. Picorni.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I don't have a lot to report tonight, but I did want to let you know that all the water main breaks that were active out there in the past are now fixed, and we have several holes in the road which we will be working on repairing over the next couple of weeks as weather permits. So first hole we have to fix is Traymore over here, east side of Warrensville Center. We currently have the road closed because we had to open up the cut in order to set it up for concrete. Hopefully we will be putting concrete in that hole tomorrow afternoon as the weather permits again. There are still 2 active leaks out there that we're aware of. Laurelhurst at Washington, there's a valve that's been leaking for almost 2 months now, and Cleveland Water's been requested to fix that several times. They have not put it on their highest priority yet because they have not come to fix it. The other leak that is still leaking is Edgerton at Meadowbrook. Same situation that's been reported to them many times. They came out and fixed it, yet it was still leaking after they did their fix, and then it was reported back again. So those are the 2 active leaks. The rest of them are holes around town. You'll see a hole like in Silsby Road by Miramar. There's a hole on Miramar between Silsby and Washington Meadowbrook. And we actually have 8 of those around town that we'll be working on.
And Miramar's on the top of the list, right?
No, I think Summerfield is,
Top of the list?
yeah.
Like I said, Traymore will be first, one at a time.
Okay.
Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Sims.
Director, coming into the city on Meadowbrook out of Cleveland Heights, that road is in terrible shape. At some point, it probably needs to be repaved, but I think there's an opportunity to do some fill. Is that on your list?
Opportunity to do what?
To put some patching in?
We do patch our section in the joints And
Right.
now, yeah.
But I think this is totally our section. I could be wrong, but it's, when you come into University Heights out of, the city of, Cleveland Heights. Both sides, but if we can only do our side, can we do our side?
The patching we have available to us right now is cold patch. It's good for filling holes and cracks. It is not a resurfacing course. Currently, the asphalt plants are closed, so you can't get the resurfacing courses. And even in these holes that we're filling them with concrete and then putting a sheet of visqueen and filling them with a cap.
Right, that's
That
different.
will
I
later
understand
have to
that.
come
Right.
through, take that cap out, put the asphalt in. Meadowbrook is that type of a condition. If you're going to try to overlay it, to smooth it, it would require the asphalt plants being open and have to be part of a paving project.
So when do they reopen? Because how long will we have to face these roads?
Meadowbrook, we had some discussions with Cleveland Heights about doing a joint project down there. However, I don't think that's ever actually become a project, so we'll have to readdress that. It's a concrete pavement, which is a little different than most of ours, because most of ours are asphalt. I think Cleveland Heights was talking about redoing it in concrete. But again, that has not become a project.
Thank you.
I think,
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chuney had a word.
So in regards to that,
Oh,
we live on Meadowbrook. The street situation is terrible, so I appreciate that was brought up. But in regard to the water line and fixing the roads, is there a plan to fix the tree lawns, or is that like homeowner's responsibility?
No, the water line contractor will be back to do restoration. They finish it too late in the fall to actually do a lot of the restoration for the water main, but they'll be back.
okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
I think Mr. Chuney had.
Yeah, and Mr. Chuney also, I think you have a comment?
Yes, Cleveland Heights replaced our water line last year on Meadowbrook in the same section, as you know, and they told us that the following year, which would be this year, they're gonna do a paving program, paving project there. And it would make sense for us, to go from Canterbury all the way to Taylor, because that's logical termini rather than stopping, middle of the block. We will continue those discussions, Jeff and I, with Cleveland Heights to see where they stand with their project. It makes sense for us to team with them, when
Right, it does make sense, and Mayor, I don't mean to just jump in like that, it makes sense. So hopefully we can make some progress, because it does not make sense for that road to be in the condition that it is, and then we just don't do anything to improve it because another community has a different schedule.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sims. Mr. Rock, I think you had something.
How's the salt replenishing going?
We have now received our full order of 1,200 tons, which is stored in Cleveland Heights. And we've also refilled our barn here with another 200 tons, which we used about 100 of it in the last snow. So we are in good shape right now for summer.
How long would that last?
The 1,200 will last us through the remainder of the year. We should actually, if it's not too bad, a remainder of the winter, we should have salt left.
Very good. Mrs. Cameron.
Yes. Mr. Proconi, I have received a complaint from a citizen who lives off of Meadowbrook, east of Warrensville Heights. On the corner there's a wooded area, and the citizen's property abuts the wooded area. And they asked if it was possible for someone in the city to take on some responsibility for helping them clean up the wooded area. They're hoping that they could have some assistance. They're getting a little old, they said, and it's getting a little tiring. And they're hoping that maybe we could, in some way, appoint or assign someone responsibility in helping clean up the wooded area.
Just for clarification, Mrs. Cameron, this is the wooded area at Meadowbrook and Warrensville Center?
Yes.
And is this the owner of the wooded area or an adjacent neighbor?
No, it's an adjacent neighbor, as far as I know, and they did not indicate that they owned the area.
Okay.
It's just that their house is nearby. And because of foot traffic and people and college kids and high school kids and people in general, it's heavily trashed.
Yes.
So maybe it can become, maybe a site for,
Mr. Harris and the Kiwanis?
well, yeah. Or, some of the ne'er-do-wells that have come under Chief Hamlet's, one of his programs that he has people cleaning up in repayment of, fines or what have you. Or John Carroll has an alternate program for people, instead of going to jail, they get to do some kind of public service, so maybe that particular area could be put on that list.
Do you know which side of Warrensville they're particularly complaining about, the east side or the west side?
It's the east side.
Okay. Well, we can take a look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can say that both wooded lots on either side of the street are in need of some assistance. And, yes, so. But thank you for bringing that, Mrs. Cameron.
Sure.
Anything further for Mr. Picorni? Very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Okay, Building Commissioner, Mr. McReynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of council. If I may offer a little insight into the plumbing problem in the fire department kitchen. Midway through that project last year, I was pulled in for some advisory inspections, and I recommended that the water valve be replaced. We actually pulled in a plumber for an estimate. It turns out that the water valve is part of a plumbing system that's made out of galvanized pipe. The problem there is that the plumber didn't want to touch the valve, thinking that it would break pipe in order to do that. His suggestion was, once we decide to replace that valve, we have to go back farther into the system. How far back is hard to tell, because some of that piping is hidden, and there's long lengths that may have to be replaced. So it could be a big project in itself. It looks like most of the plumbing in the fire department is galvanized. If you're familiar with galvanized pipe, over a period of time, it tends to corrode, and it also tends to clog. Some piping systems have an opening about as big as a pencil inside the pipe, which was originally 3/4 inch. So the project was abandoned. I was told not to pursue it because of the expense. So I just thought I'd offer that little bit.
Well, okay.
So,
Thank you, Mr. McReynolds. And
now, building department business. The ARB, the Architectural Review Board, will be meeting on March 15th. They're going to be looking at 6 different cases. One will be the new cottage proposal at the Belfair community. In addition to that, we have 2 additions, 2 residential additions, and 3 signs that will be going for the ARB. During the days between March 18th and March 21st, I'll be attending the ABOA, the Ohio Building Officials Association, continuing education classes in Dublin. I will be back in the office on March 22nd. During this time, I'll be taking classes on the new 2017 electrical code and on inspection techniques. I was asked earlier to look into a matter involving garbage left out on the front lawn. And a question was put to me by a councilman as to what sections of the code would be applicable in this case. And I found 4 that I think that we would use as a basis for citing the resident. Now, let me also preface this by saying that when we come across situations like this, my inspectors have yellow tags, which we leave at the site, and they have lines on them without script, and that the inspector can add whatever narrative he wants. For example, take your garbage back, or remove the junk car, or what have you. So that's the way that we normally address these situations. However, I found section 1442.01 E1, which considers trash, garbage on premises, yard areas to be a blighting influence and could be considered a nuisance. Also, section 1498.14, rubbish and garbage disposal. Sections A and B require the occupant of a business unit to take care of all their trash and whatever debris may be on the site. And this is coupled with section 1478.11, sections A and B, which are almost exactly worded the same except they apply to residential. And one final section I found was 1282.01, stating that the responsibility for maintaining the property is the responsibility of the homeowner. And if we give them a site, a notice, they have to respond within 10 days. Which is unfortunate where it comes to garbage, because during that time, they may come by and collect it anyway. But for the most part, if we do leave a notice, they have been diligent about responding. Finally, I was asked at the last building committee meeting to contact Shaker Heights, the cities of Shaker Heights and Lakewood regarding their sidewalk program. Each of these cities has had a successful sidewalk program that's been there for a few years. I was able to talk with Shaker Heights on the phone for quite a bit of time and got some details about their program, but I was able to meet with Lakewood and visit with them and get some of their materials, which I will be happy to discuss at the next building committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. McReynolds. Mr. Cheney, did you want to offer a report? City Engineer Joe Cheney.
Thank you. Real quick, we are currently out advertising for bids for the Silsbee Road resurfacing project. We are opening bids this Friday. Hope to get good bids on that. It is will be mandated in their contract that they're done by May 21st because the project is from Edgerton all the way to Warrensville Center here. We need to be done by the time the parade starts. So no pavers have given me any pushback on that, so I think it is doable. I would hope at the next meeting on March 19th we can award a contract and then get them started. You asked about asphalt plants. They usually open sometime after the 1st of April, so when everything gets started, hopefully we can get started on that. Silsbee and get it done before the parade. So.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Cheney? Mr. Sims.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Cheney, several council people, including Councilwoman Weiss and myself, had asked about this chairlift that we have and issues around that. So where are you going with that? Have you made any progress?
Just started the investigation. They did assign it to one of our architects to take a look at. It's a matter of replacing it, I think, is what the question was.
Well, the question is like multi-level. So I really don't want to get into the question, but what I want to get a sense of is how quickly an assessment or an evaluation can be made so that we can have some sense of what options we might pursue.
I would hope the meeting in April, I could have something back to you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm actually out of town for the March 19th meeting. I won't be in the country, so I can't report at that time.
Okay,
but I'm thinking maybe the first one in April I could have a report.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cheney.
I just want to say good luck to the chief, and I will miss him.
Yes, I think we have a couple more questions, though, for you, Mr. Cheney. Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate Councilman Sims bringing that up. Mr. Cheney, when you come back in April, if we could have just sort of a thumbnail of different options up and available to us. I myself am not looking for detailed numbers, just some kind of idea. If we replace the chairlift, these are our options. If we think about an elevator, these are our options. I think the resident that came here and expressed her concern about the apparatus has a very valid concern, and I know that my colleagues and I are interested in sort of pushing forward something like this.
The mayor has a report on the cost of an elevator with options.
Okay.
Already, but I'll be looking into the chairlift.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And maybe the Hyperloop, I don't know.
Yes. So we were discussing the G-forces that could happen on those steps. Yes, just to elaborate on what Mr. Cheney says, we do have a report on file that from a previous research on adding an elevator to that end of the building, the end opposite the southern end of the building, coming in at around $600,000. And
600?
correct. And that would include blowing out most of the conference room in the basement, losing part of the finance office, and then the elevator would open, obviously, in the back of the council chambers over here. So it would be quite an expense, and we would lose usable space here in the building also as a result.
The rule of thumb is about $75,000 a floor. And if you're gonna do an elevator, you're gonna do the basement, you're gonna do the first floor, second floor. And you have actually a half floor in between where you come in the building or on the level where the mayor's office is.
Okay.
Basically have 4 floors there. Plus you're adding it to the outside of the building, and then you gotta remodel inside. I mean, there's,
Well, how much would it cost to take out the bathroom, make that the elevator shaft area, and then put the bathrooms in another place?
I don't know if that's possible, but I can look into that. Top of my head, I can't tell you.
Yeah, I think part of the problem there, though, would be that the basement level of the bathroom would put us into the boiler room.
That's the problem.
And if we're going to retrofit an elevator, we're going to have to put it on all floors.
We have to?
Yes. I think it's ADA requirement. Okay. Mhm. Okay, right.
Well, so, if I may, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Wiseman.
Mr. Cheney said that the rule of thumb is $75,000 per floor. The estimate that we're speaking of is roughly $200,000 per floor. So perhaps we should consider getting another estimate as to the possible cost of an elevator. I realize the space issues aside, I think it would be easier for us to make some kind of determination to compare fixing a lift with some other alternatives.
Yeah, and I would also add, Mr. Cheney mentioned the half floor too. So we're talking 4 floors because there's basement, ground level, the official first floor where finance, the mayor's office, et cetera, are, and then the second floor. So that's 4. So that's 300,000 plus.
Then you have all the interior renovations.
Right.
And you're adding it to the outside of the building. So, I mean,
Right.
It's really not 200 per floor. I mean, the rule of thumb for the elevator was 75. I mean, I don't know, John, you've ever done one.
No, I thought that was in line with what I was budgeting in my head. Because you know, you're gonna put a foundation.
Correct.
You gotta dig a pit.
Oh, yeah.
It's more than just the elevator.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Sims.
and this is for Mr. Cheney. And I was trying to avoid having a detailed discussion of this because you said you were coming back in April with some options. But my question is whether a possible option is a limited use elevator that would, because it's not a general public elevator, might have different specifications and would not be as expensive if this was reserved only for the use for ADA or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know what the options are, but I hope you could bring us back
I'll
some
come back.
options.
Okay.
I think the elevator, you know, either the old study or a new study, and I don't know if we had to pay for the study, I doubt it very seriously. But if we can go back out and ask somebody else to take a look at what they would do, what harm is that?
Okay.
Mr.
Okay.
Cheney?
Yes.
On another subject, I was wondering, when do you start preparing the roads project ideas? When do you start looking at the roads and deciding which ones we should really be considering? I know you have your master list, but I assume you go out and double check.
The mayor and I and the staff actually had a conversation about that this morning. It was, you know, we updated the list as of the end of last year, so it's current up until then. You usually like to wait till the frost gets out of the ground when you go back and revisit it to see if any has fallen apart more rapidly than others versus the list we already have prepared, and we're about there. Yeah, we're about there.
Oh, really? So you'd be going out
I
in
would
the
hope
next...
they're done with the winter, but I mean, Jeff's got all this salt he's got to get rid of. I would say the end of March, it would be about the time we normally would do it, and then revisit that list and then get ready for the road program, correct?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Purdy. Are there any further questions for Mr. Cheney? All right, thank you, Mr. Cheney. That leaves community development. Mr. Grogan Myers, is he here?
He's not.
Okay. Does anybody have a report on community development for on behalf of Mr. Grogan Myers? Okay. All right. Well, if there is anything, we'll forward that along to council later. All right. council committees, building, Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am endeavoring to have a building committee meeting in March. I'm assuming the vice mayor will discuss the idea of standing committee meetings during the report. Okay, but I want to have a building meeting in March where we discuss, there's an issue that the mayor brought up in terms of a legislative fix, and I can't remember exactly what that was. Mr. Grogan Myers had an issue as well. I'd also like to sort of take a look, if we could, and have some discussions about the wheelchair accessibility, just so we can sort of have a running start by the time we come back and talk to the engineer in April. I mean, I think this is, I'm sorry it took Mrs. Hubbin coming here to speak to us about the issue, but I think it's something that really desperately needs our attention. And as much as we can do to get ready, I think I'm sort of willing to do that. So that's
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wiseman. Civic information, Mrs. Cameron.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. Finance, Mrs. Purdy.
Thank you, Mayor. As you mentioned in your remarks, there is a Finance Committee and Finance Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow night, March 6th, 6:30 p.m. here in council chambers, with the mayor being the primary subject. The mayor's vision and ideas for the budget for next year. If needed, we will have another meeting on March 12th. And we hope to have the budget prepared with a recommendation for the March 19th council meeting, passed at the special meeting on the 26th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pardee. Governmental Affairs, Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, thank you. Based on the council of the whole retreat last week, tax abatement for new construction, or for existing homes, came up as one of our exploratory priorities. So we'll be discussing that in the next Government Affairs Committee meeting in April. And I already set up a meeting with Tim Bolin from Cleveland Heights. They don't have a citywide tax abatement program, which we thought they did. It's only right now in certain neighborhoods. So I'm going to have a meeting before the April meeting. And then the law director is also doing some research on neighboring cities and the different ordinances.
Correct.
Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Recreation, Mr. Ertl.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ertl. Safety, Mr. Rock.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you for Chief Hammond for your years of service to our city. We're going to miss you. We're going to miss you on our safety committee because we were going to have a meeting soon. I spoke with the mayor last week. We talked about a wide range of issues. One of them being the guns that he touched on in his report and what we can and cannot do as a city. I think we should touch on that in a committee meeting and discuss those options. We also would like to have sort of a kickoff meeting to discuss ideas going forward. I spoke with Chief Perko about some ideas he had for his department and where we could take that. So I would like to have a meeting as soon as possible, March or early April.
Okay. Very good, Mr. Rock. Also, and along with that, we do have a number of volunteers for a possible neighborhood watch program.
Good.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you, Mr. Rock. Next is Service and Utilities, Mr. Sims.
No report, Mayor, but we will meet at the first opportunity, given the cycle that we have decided for committee meetings.
Yes.
And the first topic would really be just to make sure that we had a strong sense of what capital items are included in the budget, so that as our director will come with requests, we'll know, we won't have to say, is that in the budget? We'll know that it's in the budget moving forward.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Sims. Committee of the Whole, Mrs. Pardee.
Thank you, Mayor. Council and the mayor had a retreat on February 26th from 5:30 to 9:30 after discussing priorities for the city that we had all come upon and learned as we were campaigning and meeting with residents. We, as a group, identified 3 broad categories: economic development, housing, and branding. There were other items that we were very interested in, other priority areas that fit into these because they are broad categories. We also had roads and safety on the board. The broad categories were broken down into priority areas with timing involved. And I do want to say that we came up with immediate next steps, a couple of which you've heard right now. Under the Housing Committee, we determined that there was an interest in looking at tax abatement for homes that have home improvements, so we would be abating the improvements, and Governmental Affairs is going to be looking into that. We talked about the Building Committee having a meeting to talk about the land bank and how we want to start to activate our land bank that University Heights set up, and to look at a protocol and the purpose. We talked about in economic development, the mayor revisiting, because we're focusing on zoning, the original contract with our contractor, David Hart, to help us with zoning, to determine how far we got when we worked with him. The mayor is also going to be looking into hiring an economic development director, and that will be a next step in economic development. With branding, this council passed work with the Guide Studio so that we can start work on branding. We'll be creating a committee of residents to work with Guide Studio. So that's going to be the first step there. And finally, we decided we were going to look at having committee meetings that were fairly regular, so it's easy for us and easy for the public to know when council committee meetings would occur. We have council meetings the first and third Monday of each month. Council committee meetings will be held on the second Monday of each month. Hopefully, we will fit 2 in, one at 7 o'clock and one at 8 o'clock. So there'll be 1-hour meetings, 7 to 8 and 8 to 9 on a rotating basis. If more council committee meetings are needed, we'll look at the 4th Tuesday. But right now, we're starting with the second Monday, which is the 12th, and we will at least have a finance committee meeting on that date at this time. So that is what was referenced earlier. You can always count on the second Monday for finance committee meetings. Committee meetings, not finance. Now.
It's felt that way lately.
Right, it has. So this was a group process. It was a very energizing, collegial process, and I just invite any one of us around the table to add anything that I've missed about the retreat. Thank you.
Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to mention my appreciation to the administration for permitting council to make have these discussions and participate in the collaborative process for the city, because I think that as we have all known for a long time, the members at this table have a lot of ideas and a lot of good ideas and a lot of zest and fervor to do what we can. So I thought the meeting we had the other night was very productive, and we all were sort of part of the process, but I really would thank the administration for letting us participate in this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you. Anyone else?
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron.
Yes, sir. I have a comment from a citizen who has noticed that the council and mayor seem to have a new camaraderie, and he wanted to applaud what he saw was a very enhanced communication style, shall we say. And we wanted to thank all of us for continuing in our efforts to work on behalf of the city. So, make sure you're aware.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mrs. Cameron. And I appreciate all 7 of you in facilitating this collaborative style that we have embarked on this year. If there is nothing further, we do have the executive session to go to, which means we will have to ask the public to excuse themselves at this time. We want to thank all of you for coming out here this evening and being a part of your government in action.